Hello, I'm Stan Cottrell, and today I thought we would go over the safety features and the operation of the horizontal bandsaw. So what types of metal can we cut on a horizontal bandsaw? We have several examples here. We can cut round pieces on the horizontal bandsaw. We can cut square pieces, and we can cut angle stock on the horizontal bandsaw. The thing to remember is if the piece can fit in the vise, it can be cut on the horizontal bandsaw. So if you have a really large piece that you work at pushing through the vertical bandsaw, perhaps the horizontal bandsaw would be a good choice. Okay, I'd like to review some of the safety rules before we actually cut a piece on the horizontal bandsaw. First of all, there should be no rings on your fingers. Should remove all jewelry. Take it off. Sleeves should not be loose, such as this. You don't want anything that is loose and can get caught in the saw. Roll your sleeves up. If you have long hair, tie it back, tie it up. Ponytail is sometimes not enough. Put it in a bun. Make sure you have safety glasses on. Okay, let's review the controls of the saw. First of all, this yellow box is the emergency shutoff. If you have an emergency or you forget where the controls are, this is how you shut the saw off. You simply push that button in, and it kills the power to the saw. The saw will stop operating. To revoke that, you turn the red knob to the left until it pops out, and it reactivates the saw. Let's go over here. This is the shut-off button for the saw itself. You push it in to activate it. To deactivate it, it gets turned to the right. It will pop out. The green button is how we turn the saw on. This button with the arrow is how we turn the water on. Should not operate this saw without the water flowing. Over here we have two levers. We have a red lever and a black lever. The red lever is a safety. If it's in the off position, such as it is now, no matter what I do with this knob, nothing is going to occur because the safety is off. When we activate the safety by putting it on, moving this lever will lower the head of the saw. The more I turn it, the faster it drops. So let's actually turn the saw on. We're going to check this to make sure that the button is out. I'm going to push in the green button. I'm going to make certain that the water is flowing. We're going to put the red lever to the on position, which will activate this black lever, and we're going to move the black lever, and you'll notice that the head of the saw is dropping. After it cuts the piece off, you need to come over here and push in the red button. Once the red button has been depressed, please immediately take both of these levers and return them to the upright position. On the saw itself, we have the saw blade guides that you can slide back and forth to adjust so that you have support very close to where you're cutting. So if you have a large piece, you want to move the guide back. If you have a small piece, you want to pull it forward. Just make sure you snug it up after you move it so that the piece doesn't slide around. Now we're ready, I think, to operate the saw. So I'm going to raise the head of the saw up a little bit. I'm going to put one hand under here, and I'm going to use my legs and just push up. And that gives me enough space underneath the blade that I can put the piece of metal in. So we're going to walk around the back of the saw now. And I'm going to lift this lever on the vise jaw and pull it back. And that way we can open up the vise enough that we'll be able to put a piece of metal in. We're going to cut this piece of aluminum tubing, which I'm going to slide into the vise, and I'm going to put it against the stationary jaw. A long piece, you should use a support such as this, so that you don't have to balance the piece and try and tighten the vise at the same time. At this time, I'm going to lift and push. What I'm going to do now is simply turn this a little bit, but I'm not going to tighten it yet. I just want to make sure that the vise jaw is up against the piece and the piece is sitting straight in the vise. Now I'm going to walk back around the front of the saw. So now we're going to lower the head of the saw so it's above but not touching the piece of metal. I'm going to put the safety to the on position, and I'm going to lower the head of the saw. We're going to stop it just before it gets to the point where it's touching the saw. Again, I'm going to secure both of these levers in the upright position. At this time, I can move this piece and set it wherever it is that I want to do the cut. So you can mark the piece, or you can measure from the blade outward. As long as you know that your piece is in the right position in relation to the blade, you're all set. Then I'm going to tighten the vise by turning this dial. Put two hands on the wheel, don't use the convenience handle, and really crank it tight. And now we're ready to cut. So I'm going to turn the red knob to the right. It will pop out. I'm going to push in the green button. I am going to lower the safety to the on position, and I'm going to let the head of the saw drop pretty slowly. And we're going to cut through that piece of metal. When the piece has been cut off, you push in the red button, put both of these levers straight up so that we're in a safe position to raise the head of the saw. Using your knees, lift the head of the saw. And that's how you cut a piece off in the horizontal bandsaw. Okay, I thought I would take a few minutes and talk about different types of material that you can cut in this saw and what to look for when you're putting them in the machine. As you can see, we have a really large piece of aluminum tubing in the saw right now, and it's actually not safe to cut this piece of aluminum tubing in the saw. You have to make certain when you put a piece in the machine that the major part of the diameter is down inside the vise so that it will clamp securely. If it's above the vise, such as this piece is, it's going to lift when you go to tighten it, and it's not going to be secure. So we can't cut this piece in this saw. We can certainly cut this small piece of tubing in the saw. As you can see, it certainly fits down within the vise jaw. There's no problem. We can tighten it, and it will be held very securely in the machine. So you have to really pay attention with the size of the tubing versus the size of the jaw to make sure everything fits. We're going to practice cutting a piece of angle stock. We're actually going to cut this piece of angle stock. There's a couple of ways you can put the piece of angle stock in the saw. If one were to take the angle stock and slide it in such as this, close the jaw, snug it up, as the blade was to cut down through this piece of angle stock, you would get a fair amount of vibration because there isn't a whole lot supporting this jaw in this direction. It's all sitting in air. It's being held down here, not up here. So rather than cut the piece of angle like that, we install it such as a tent, like a tent would look. Let me show you what that looks like. Rather than having it in the vise like this, simply going to rotate it and put it like that. The reason this is preferable, both sides are even. So the machine is going to come down and it's going to cut very even. It will be a balanced cut. So let's actually cut this. Again, as soon as it finishes cutting, the safety goes up and the black lever goes up. There will be times when you want to put a rectangular piece into the saw. I've seen a lot of people put the piece in this fashion. So you have the largest side facing up and down. What that does is that makes the saw cut a longer distance through, and it's a better chance for the saw to go crooked. We prefer if you always put the shortest side up and down. So what I want to do is cut this piece in the horizontal bandsaw, but as you can see, it's very short. If we're going to cut a short piece in the horizontal bandsaw, we have to support the back of the vise so the vise closes straight. So how do we determine that? You determine that by looking at the piece, and if it is less than half the length of the vise, you need to put a support piece in the back. And this is how we're going to do that. I'm going to slide this piece in without putting my hands under the blade. I'm going to come around the back of the saw, and I'm going to put a piece of the same size right in the back. I'm going to lift the vise and push it, and I'm going to tighten it using the handle. Now we can safely cut through that piece and know that the piece is going to stay there. I'll show you how that works. Turn the red knob to the right, it pops out. Press the green button in. The safety to the on position. We're going to lower the blade and let it cut through the piece. I'm lowering it kind of fast, but I'm going to slow it down just before we get to the metal. And we're just going to let it cut through. When you're finished, you're going to put the safety up, you're going to put the black lever up. I want to talk a little bit about when you're finished with the saw at the end of your session. We want to clean all the material that's been dropped out of here, and you want to recycle it if possible in a recycle bin. You want to wipe the saw down with a paper towel, and if water is on it or this coolant fluid, you want to take some WD-40 and spray it on the table so it doesn't rust. Then you're all set to go and the saw's ready for the next person.
Do you want to say anything about sweeping up chips?
No.
Okay.
That's why we employ Manny.